this edition of Source Code, we'll zoom in on the Democratic National Convention. We'll go inside the convention hall with Pratap Chatterjee of Corp Watch to discuss the big donors behind both parties. And Verna Avery Brown of DC Underground brings us Criminalizing Dissent, a piece that looks at how citizens trying to get their voices into politics are shut down by dispersion tactics and police infiltration. But first, Andy Derringer sets the scene with his download on the DNC.
Not so long ago, political conventions were about discussion and heated debate concerning issues of national importance. Now, conventions are as scripted as the television programs that broadcast them. So how do progressives, such as anti-war activists, get their message heard by the party leadership? At last month's Democratic Convention in Boston, activists were relegated to a so-called free speech zone that looked more like a detention center than an outlet for the First Amendment.
Fight and defend free speech and stand up against this cage that you have been forced to walk through.
While those that would have their voices heard generally avoided the barbed wire and low beams, they nonetheless were organized and active in their call for change.
Boston is the site for a medley of actions. These include everything from marches to rallies to direct action. One example of an action that's taking place is an action at the free speech zone, which is really nothing but a model of the future of containing protests within heavily fenced, barbed wire, and netted environments. So the Save Our Civil Liberties action is going to be a creative visual action in which people kneel a la the victims' Camp X-Ray in Guantanamo Bay. And we're hoping to show the creative juxtaposition of Camp X-Ray in Guantanamo Bay to Boston, or as we might call it, Camp DNC.
We caught up with former presidential candidate Congressman Dennis Kucinich as he was leaving a forum advocating for a Department of Peace. I asked him about his decision to release his delegates prior to the convention and not take his anti-war plank to the floor, as he implied he would do during his mostly symbolic campaign for the nation's highest office.
See, what I'm saying is I reserve the right to continue to disagree with John Kerry on a whole range of things. And I'm still going to be challenging him on those very issues, which I challenged him in on the campaign trail. I don't go back on anything that I've said.
Okay, fair enough. How are political conventions still relevant today?
It's always important for people to come together and share information. Now think about it. New York Times poll, 9 out of 10 delegates oppose the war. Isn't it interesting to have them talking and sharing notes with each other from around the country? See, people have to come together. These conventions are important because you get people who find that there's others who think like them around the country, and there's still a mandate for change. These conventions are very important. And I only wish that we wouldn't have the kind of security stuff going on, because it would be helpful for the delegates to have more interaction with what's happening on the street.
In this week's edition of Source Code, we'll deconstruct the concept of borders and walls and the many ways in which people become caged because of corporate and political agendas. An interview with Rania Masri draws the connection between the abuses at Abu Ghraib and the human rights abuses endemic to the American prison system. Then, our activist nation partner, Third World Majority, presents an image from the immigrants' experience inside the U.S. border and the numerous circumstances that brought them here. But first, we'll look at the privatization of prisons in this country in this week's installment of The Download.
An enterprising broadcaster in Utah had his crew on the scene at a nearby prison riot, and it was there on television for the entire nation to see.
While prisoner unrest is hardly a new phenomenon in American jails, what is more alarming is the doubling of our prison population in the last decade. It took the U.S. over 150 years to imprison its first million citizens. It's taken less than 15 years to incarcerate the second million.
As far as I'm concerned, I can't blame the inmates for doing what they did, but I believe they went about it in the wrong way.
Last July, the Crowley County Correctional Facility in southern Colorado experienced a major security meltdown when over 1,000 inmates took control of the facility for over 5 hours, while underpaid, poorly trained prison guards had to call headquarters in Nashville, Tennessee for permission to use tear gas to quell the crowd.
Crowley County Correctional Facility is a private prison that was built in Olney Springs in 1998. It opened up its doors to the inmates in October the 16th. We were transferred from Minnesota, another private prison, to this prison in Olney Springs. And within a month, they brought in 150 Wyoming inmates. Then another month after that, they brought in 200 Washington inmates. Those Washington inmates rioted at that time. These are guys from Washington who were treated better by their system, that were allowed to have their vegan diets. The DOC recognized their dietary needs, and they received a lot more food. When they got here, the peanut butter and jelly sandwich on their tray, we were accustomed to that, wasn't enough for them. They were expecting more food. They had cut our food supply down drastically, claiming that they didn't have enough money to feed us. The first thing they cut is medical, and they charge the inmates for medical. Then they cut the food, and they dilute things, and they serve byproducts. They serve contaminated meat, or they'll serve rejected meat, off-spec product. People don't believe that, but it does happen.
The power and the truth is practice. May all beings have happiness and the cause of happiness. May all be free from sorrow and the causes of sorrow. May all never be separated from the sacred happiness which is sorrowless. May all live in equanimity without too much attachment and too much aversion, and live believing the equality of all that live. I started training for Team Tibet in India, climbing. We climbed for about a week straight, learning how to do that, learning how to do banner drops, learning how to deal with media, learning how to get your message across, learning how to deal with police and other people of authority coming in and being arrested, just covering all the bases.
He would go to the climbing site, which are these great mango trees, and he came back and all the other instructors just kept one by one coming up to me and saying, like, do you know what a great climber Phil is? Are you aware? Like, he is so terrific at this, and he's so calm, and yet he's just really excelling, and I think a lot of the leadership took notice. So I wasn't surprised when he was contacted months later and asked if he would be part of a climbing action inside Beijing.
I didn't know any of that. I feel ready. I feel like I'm ready to take this on. I feel like the time is now. I feel like everything is culminating. Everything is pointing in the direction of, let's do this, let's go the distance, let's make it happen.
We're as ready as we can be. And we have an incredible team of people gathered around. We will have hubs operating around the world, doing media, doing support. I'm on the outside because I can't go back to China, but I'm not just going to be sitting at home wringing my hands. I'm actively involved in making sure that every person who goes inside is going to get out quickly and is going to get out safely.
We need to all rise up, and we need to make this as big as we can right now, because now's the time, and that's how I know we're ready and Team Tibet's ready. Everything's pointing to it, and that's the gold right there. It's just making people aware of what's going on there, and making China really answer some hard questions that they want to hide.